The gun debate. It's different for now. Joining us on Columbus on the Record this week, Ann Fisher, host of All Sides with Ann Fisher on 89.7 NPR News. Jim Siegel, State House reporter for the Columbus Dispatch. Janetta King of Innovation Ohio. And Michael Miller, attorney and former Franklin County prosecutor. Whether it's the activism of the high school students in Florida or just the increasing number and frequency of mass shootings, the gun debate has turned. Take Governor Kasich, for example. The man who has signed bills to allow hidden guns in bars and in daycare centers said this about the Florida high school massacre.
I was talking to a friend of mine this morning. He's a big gun collector. I said, if all of a sudden you couldn't buy an AR-15, what would you lose? Would you feel as though your Second Amendment rights would be eroded because you couldn't buy a god-darn AR-15? These are the things that have to be looked at, and action has to happen before. And look, you're never going to fix all of this, but common sense gun laws make sense.
Shortly after that interview, as Ohio Public Radio's Karen Kassler noticed, Kasich changed his campaign website, taking down his uncompromising gun rights stances. Lieutenant Governor Mary Taylor, who wants to succeed him, called him out on it. She released a statement saying all too often in the aftermath of these tragic events, there is knee-jerk reactions to attack the Second Amendment rights of our citizens rather than to address the root causes, which often center around mental illness. Restricting the rights of law-abiding Ohioans to legally purchase a gun does not do that. Neither does removing your prior support for pro-Second Amendment legislation from a website. Another shot across John Kasich's bow there. And for Kasich, this is a bold, I would say risky move for a man who perhaps, likely, wants the Republican nomination for president someday.
Well, I think that bold and risky moves are in order. It certainly catapulted, Donald Trump into the presidency. So, John Kasich, but it goes way, way past where he's been for a long, long time. And it's interesting what he's replaced it with on the website. There's still reference to gun, but it's this common sense thing and that sort of a thing. It's bold, but he wants to make another bold move in 2020, it looks like.
Yeah, so the more cynical part of me says, maybe this is politics to distinguish himself from Donald Trump, consistent with that brand that he wants to be the alternative to Trump. That said, I think people who are taking a look at what's happening and are changing their minds, coming to the conclusion that common sense gun reform is the right thing, I think they should be welcomed into the coalition. Now, Governor Kasich is governor for another year, and as governor, he could do some things here in the state, like champion some of the bills that are currently pending that fall under that common sense gun reform.
Well, and he's established a secret panel of people to study gun reform.
Yeah, so we'll see. He's got some time here.
Michael Miller, how does that affect John Kasich's standings for the Republican base, the hardcore Republican?
Well, obviously, I think he probably loses some, but I don't think a lot. When you have such a tragedy like this, Mike, with children involved and so forth, I think political people have to do something. And some of them will actually go to one extent or the other and actually say things that are meaningful. Other ones will kind of take the middle, well, we need to do this stuff that really doesn't matter to anything. And I think the governor's probably serious in what he's saying. Is there some politics involved, perhaps? But I do think he's serious. Same thing, look back 4 years ago when Governor Strickland. And he changed completely on his feelings. And maybe it was politics, but I give him the benefit of the doubt that it was something he just come to change his mind about.
Yeah, he said Governor Strickland said it was Sandy Hook that changed his mind.
Yes, and one thing that Governor Kasich said in that thing you just ran is, there is no final answer to this. If we ban all these guns, the ones he's talking about and so forth, you're still going to have some of this stuff. But common sense tells us, I think we need to do something. But whether we get to that point or not, who knows?
Mike DeWine, a little less bold than John Kasich as far as his switching on gun rights. Jim Siegel, he says, let's tighten up background checks but not expand them. Also some school safety issues, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't know how much Mike DeWine is really going to come over to the side where Kasich is right now. Nor do I know if nor do I think necessarily that legislative Republicans are going to do so. Next week, Governor Kasich has announced that he plans to roll out a list of proposals related to gun safety and hand them over to the legislature and say, we need to do this. I think he says he's been convening with a group of people who are gun experts on both sides of the issue. And he says they have formed up these proposals. We don't know he won't say what they're going to be, but they probably relate to things like he talked about there, assault style weapons, the size of magazines, things
background checks,
bump stock bans, background checks, things of that nature. But what will the Republicans in the legislature do? They've had zero interest in doing anything that goes against the NRA for 20 years. Yeah. And I don't know that they're going to start now.
And in fact, I think that it's fair to say their agenda was very pro-NRA, with the last couple of years seeing the guns in bars, being able to carry on college campuses, daycares, things like that.
The gun debate has also divided Democrats somewhat. The Democrats running for governor, Dennis Kucinich, jumped right on calls for banning the AR-15.
Enough is enough. Enough is enough. We are not going to be silent anymore. We are going to be active. We are going to show people that we have the power to push back. We're going to show people that Ohio, the people of this state, can lead the way in an assault weapons ban. We are not going to let any of our children, again, have to face this kind of threat without anyone knowing that we have the power to change the dynamic.
Janetta King, Richard Cordray did not go as far as Dennis Kucinich. He wants universal background checks, bump stock ban, but no banning of the AR-15 or similar weapons. What's his strategy there? Why not go as far as Dennis Kucinich and get those far left Democrat votes?
There's a spectrum there, and I think those far left Democratic voters are Dennis Kucinich's. He's very comfortable in that space. He's always been, very consistent there, and I think, Rich is a different type of. Mr. Cordray is a different type of candidate.
Does it cause trouble for him in a Democratic primary?
I think that
for Rich Cordray, I mean?
Yeah. I don't think so. So in terms of this issue, I don't think this gun issue, because he did come out with background checks and support of background checks and others, I don't think it's a problem. Many people like to point out that in the past he, was someone who was supported, by folks in the gun lobby. But that was 10 years ago, and as we just said, so much has changed. He is one of those that has, been on the other side and have been impacted by these current events.
The one thing that he suggested, though, that I'm not quite sure I completely understand, he said he would create local gun trafficking task force and appoint a gun violence prevention czar if elected. And I'm not sure what the local gun trafficking task forces would do at the local level. I don't really understand what his point is there, except to spread around some sense of power about this. I don't get it.
Jim, how many working groups, task forces, czars,
blue ribbon
panels have you covered in your career?
Well, the longer my career has gone, the lesser of them I cover, because they just end up mostly not doing much. I do think, though, that I believe that, Democrats, unlike in the past probably, like I said, 20 years, are maybe start to think that gun control is not a net loss for us when we run on it. And if that becomes the case, it'll become more interesting that Democrats will start trumpeting these things rather than just keeping quiet. And I do think if Dennis Kucinich continues to push for a ban on the AR-15, it is going to force Rich Cordray to talk about it specifically more, and is going to push him one way or another. He's going to have to specifically address it if Dennis Kucinich and others in that race.
Mike Miller, what often happens is not that the NRA doesn't give to the Democrats, but they give a lot of money to groups to run attack ads against a Richard Cordray or against a Dennis Kucinich, and that has the same effect of supporting their opponents.
Sure. Well, the Kucinich thing bothers me for one reason, not what he said about the guns. I'm not sure what the answer to that is. I'm not smart enough to solve that problem. But I think some of that was just raw politics, internal politics. I mean, to accuse Cordray, which he did, as being the singular one person that led to the overruling of the laws in Cuyahoga County when the U.S. Supreme Court. I mean, to me, that's just playing politics. He takes this very serious incident and uses it to attack an opponent that to me is just
Cordray as attorney.
Is not he's the attorney general.
He was defending
the state
law.
Doing his job, and he gets blamed as if he's some sort of a wild person coming in. And to me, it just detracted from anything, in my opinion, that Kucinich said, because to me, it's politics and it's not really going to the issue.
Yeah, and one thing I think Democrats need to be careful of if they're going to campaign on this is make sure you're going after the gun problem, not the gun owners. If the gun owners start thinking you're coming after them, this will become a net loss.
And I think it's also problematic for people to go after the NRA and then want to, be successful with voters, because the NRA brand means something very different to an average Ohioan. The NRA is in their communities doing gun safety training, working with the Boy Scouts. It's not this, lobby that, those of us in this business know them as. And so I don't think that's a winning strategy either. It has to be more about the policy and the candidate.
And it could be, the thinking is, with Donald Trump's unpopularity, the conservative Republican vote might be suppressed in 2018, Janetta. But if gun rights becomes a big issue, that would energize the right, I would guess, and that would not be good news for Democrats.
Yeah, that might be right. It's interesting, though, because Mike DeWine has a gun record of his own, and the NRA has not supported him in the past. And so I think right now in a primary, he's kind of keeping low. But, when push comes to shove, maybe they'll think he will be better than. But he's got some interesting dynamics himself.
Okay. Go to our next topic. Prosecutors say Ohio was the target of a Russian propaganda effort to divide Americans. The Columbus Dispatch dug through some investigative documents and found several instances of Russians using social media accounts that targeted Ohio events and media outlets. One tried to use the OSU knife attack to support Donald Trump's travel ban. Investigators say the Russians set up Twitter accounts that looked like legitimate Ohio news organizations. They then used those fake accounts to put their spin on stories. Janetta King, Donald Trump won Ohio by almost 500,000 votes. How much of a role did these Twitter feeds play in that?
So it's not insignificant, and we've actually done some research around this, and it's two things. It's the Russian bots and the volume of activity that they did posing as, voters in the states, but it's also a very mature and coordinated conservative infrastructure online that then, when those bots put out content, it is amplified and taken, to really viral levels very, very quickly. So this is very dangerous. It's not only elections that are in jeopardy, and they absolutely are. They're going to continue to be. It worked once. Why wouldn't they continue to do that? They're also seizing on issues in the mainstream media, like the gun issue, and like the stabbing at OSU, to really sow discord and discontent in a pretty dangerous way that, I think at the very core of it undermines democracy.
Well, I'm thinking about they targeted Ohio accounts, but it doesn't stay in Ohio. What happens in Ohio on Twitter doesn't stay in Ohio. The amplification went well beyond the state of Ohio.
And the indictment mentioned, I think, Pennsylvania, Florida,
Right.
and I forget what other state, but they were closer in Ohio.
And also swing states.
But Ohio one was 8 points, so it didn't probably have as much of an impact. Mike, why are conservatives more susceptible to spreading this? I mean, the liberal groups do spread around fake news as well, but it seems like conservative stuff, it catches fire more quickly. Why do you think that is?
I don't know, Mike. I'll accept your premise that the right does it more than the left.
Well,
I'm absolutely certain.
Anecdote, there was one guy, the guy who, he got fired from his job. I forget where he was working. He wrote the fake story about the ballot boxes being stolen in Ohio. And he told the New York Times or somebody saying, yeah, I make more money on these posts when I write conservative ones than I do when I write liberal ones. So
So we had an economic outlet. Well, I don't know. What we talked about earlier about an attack on democracy, clearly it is. And does it sow seeds of discord? Yes. But I don't think the Russians are the only ones that do that. I think our own parties do. I see many ads put on by Republicans and Democrats that I find just terrible. And to me, they destroy, attempt to destroy. They don't admit it, but democracy, just like the Russians are doing.
who's to blame, Jim? The Russians for sending it out, or us for believing the stuff they send out?
Well, as with everything, it's a shared thing.
Yeah.
I mean, people just, if you're really wanting to be informed, and you try to find trusted news sources and objective news sources to provide you your news. I know there's, the mainstream media has been under attack by the president and others for a while now. But look, these are, and if you go on these Twitter or you go on some of these websites that are not reputable, and you see all these outlandish stories, and what do why are you just suddenly believing it? Yeah. I mean, why don't you ever question whether it's really true that all these votes were really stolen and put in some warehouse in Franklin County?
Yeah.
We're at really the beginning of a new era. It seems like, we've been enmeshed in this whole internets thing for decades, but it's really been less than 10 years that it's been like it is now, and really only the last 3 or 4 years that we've had this kind of interference and the technological ability to interfere in this way. And it is going to be interesting to see how people adapt to it over time. Are they just going to roll over, or are they going to change their habits and become more astute consumers of information? There was a day when we were all reading the same thing and it didn't matter anymore, but we're not. And it's going to be interesting to see how people work with that.
The internet's a little lawless. I mean, it is going to be our responsibility to, wade through that and see if this is real content, because it's hard to enforce. You're never going to rid the internet of disinformation.
And it's great to read stuff that you already agree with. So.
And companies are taking steps. Facebook, is limiting what they put in the newsfeed. We'll see how that turns out.
Right.
The effort to bring medical marijuana to the Ohio market has landed in court. 20 firms that wanted to grow medical pot but were denied licenses have filed suit. They say the state violated its own policies when it awarded provisional licenses to 12 large-scale growers. Jimmy Gould leads this group. He helped bring medical marijuana to Ohio, but the state denied him a license. The problems, the lawsuit, they have led to calls to delay the mandated September 8th deadline for the start of the medical marijuana program. Jim Siegel, what are the chances of that? Is this really going to muck up the works a bit with this planned mandated rollout of this program by September 8th?
Sure looks like it, because this is a mess right now. I mean, they awarded 12 large growers licenses to grow marijuana, and there are some serious questions about how the process they went through. The state auditor, Dave Yost, has raised questions about the process. Jimmy Gould is raising serious questions about the actual criteria that these folks did not meet. You have to be more than 500 feet or yards from a school, and some of them are not. Some of them don't have enough cash on hand to meet the standards, and so there's some real questions about how this was all done. And I would be surprised if the courts were able to sort this out quick enough and clear the path so that in September the medical marijuana is available.
I am baffled by how they could screw this up so much, and it makes you wonder: did they just not care enough to follow the rules of the rules they set for themselves? It doesn't make any sense how badly they've messed this up. It just doesn't.
All I can think about is, medical marijuana was passed for a reason, to help people.
Exactly.
These kids with seizures, and it is such a shame that, they've waited all of this time, and now because of these process issues, they're going to have to wait even longer. It's kind of heartbreaking.
Like, you've seen government in action from both sides. Is this just because it's new to us? Are these rookie mistakes, or is this a lack of planning, incompetence?
Well, I'm kind of in the camp with Ann. I can't imagine how they mess it up as badly as they mess it up. All these suits that are being filed, and as Jim talks about the problems that have arisen and hiring the felon, and which may not be big in itself, but having rules where some people, right, could, Jimmy, that if they wanted to, the results. I mean, it's totally unacceptable. But I think probably Auditor Yost is right. It's too late to stop this train. Now, what come September the 1st, if it's not ready, do I think there'll be some ways where people with children or adults that really need this sort of thing, I think somebody will figure out a way to get it to them, legally or illegally. It would be my thought.
But this was 2 years, Jim, to get this in place after after the legislature approved it. Was it not enough time? It seemed like at the time that 2 years was a long time to get this up and running, because we're not the first state to do this.
Right. Look, I'm not going to pretend like I understand the ins and outs of how this had to be put together, but from a practical standpoint, as an outsider watching this, it seemed like 2 years would be enough time to put in place something that other states have already been doing. And look, we wanted to have a lot of controls here. That's how it was set up. It was designed so that we would not just have some free-for-all, and that medical marijuana would actually just end up being recreational marijuana because no one's checking. So, you know, that's the kind of system we want. It's going to take time to put that in place, but 2 years, you'd think that would have been enough. But clearly there's been some technical glitches on the way, and again, we're going to have to wait and see the courts can sort it out.
You know, they were able to put together a system for legalizing gambling in this state, and that, you know, they were able to do that, and a big difference between that and this is how they've separated it between different state departments, state agencies, and I think that kind of goes to the problem. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing half the time, and it's just discombobulated, just
And in this
flummoxed.
situation, you also have some new business ventures that are tied to this, right? You have new lots of money at stake for those folks who got denied the application.
Right, that's a big part of this. There's
Yeah.
a lot of money and a lot of people who want to have their hands out looking for it.
And there wasn't just 2 casino companies coming into town or into the state.
Right.
There were 60 that applied.
Nobody wrote it into the Constitution that said only you and you get to grow marijuana. They tried that. I think.
Right, yeah, right.
All right, our last topic. The dream of bringing the Hyperloop transit system to Columbus has some tax money behind it now. The Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission will spend $2.5 million for feasibility and environmental studies. The proposed route would link Pittsburgh, Columbus, and Chicago. It's like a pneumatic tube. Cars in a vacuum tube would travel at more than 600 miles an hour, meaning you can get to Chicago in about a half hour. It would transport passengers and freight. The Columbus route is one of 9 under consideration around the world by the company Hyperloop One. Mike Miller, are you going to be the first to try the Hyperloop?
Boy, I hope I live that long. I think it sounds fantastic. I was just hoping we'd have, you know, some small mass transit. This thing is just phenomenal to me. And what I've read about it, I know they talked about L.A. to San Francisco, which is the same distance-wise basically as Columbus to Chicago, and getting there in 29 minutes or something, up to I think 750 miles an hour, frictionless, shoot through this tube. It's kind of like being on a drive-in bank, you know, that
Yeah.
little thing I put in and it just takes.
Put all your pennies in it and see what happens.
I mean, and the money they say, I know that the LA one was $6 billion, and if they wanted to make it including freight for cars and all that, it would be like $7.2 billion. Who knows whether that would be accurate? I imagine it'd be a lot more than that. But just the concept of it, it's almost space age to me. It sounds wonderful.
The idea of adding freight, though, to it is that creates an economy that they wouldn't have. I mean, that could add to the revenues
Absolutely.
for this, and it'd come back in spades. You know, $1 billion here, $1 billion there.
It's still hard for
We're
me.
talking about real money.
Yeah, right. It's hard for me to get my head around this because I still have the battle scars of trying to convince Ohioans that we want the $400 million for high-speed rail. And, you know, they were not open to, you know, that alternative type of transportation. So we'll see.
Well,
Maybe we'll just go past high-speed rail and go
Well,
right to
that's what-
The
Hyperloop.
Kasich administration sent it back. I
Sent
mean,
it back.
Ohio got the money, and Governor Kasich sent it back.
Is there any state money on this, Jim? What's the state feeling at the State House for this? Because Cleveland wants to do one too, apparently.
Well, sure.
Different company. Yeah.
Yeah, just Hyperloop everybody right through Ohio onto somewhere else.
Lima, there'll be a stop
Right.
in Lima. And
Well, to be honest, I don't think it's being discussed much at this
Yeah.
point. I mean, we're still too early on, and I hate to say pipe dream, but there's
exactly what
still
it is.
some who still think it might still be in that stage. I mean, it's good to see that we're doing the preliminary work and getting ready and hoping that we'll get there. But I don't know how seriously anyone's stepping up and trying to come up with financial solutions to this yet.
Speaking of the freight, one of the things I read saying that the Hyperloop could get corn from Indiana to the John Glenn Airport in a half hour, and it could be in Japan the next day. So my question is, Mike, do the Japanese really want their corn that fast?
I don't think so.
Are they willing to pay for it?
Yeah, that seems a bit quick. I don't know. This whole thing is just spectacular to me. I would love, I know it may not be practical at all. If high-speed rail wasn't, then maybe this isn't. But they do have picked, I think, in India, it's supposed to be the first time. That's going to be the first link to go. And if it really goes in 2 years, 5 years, 8 years, whatever it is, and if it works, goodness gracious.
if it'll work in India, it'll work
Work in
anywhere,
India,
right?
it'll work here, yeah.
But the question is, Janetta, while we do this, are we passing up more feasible transportation options?
Well, I mean, we are, and that's, I guess that's just a frustrating thing when businesses look to locate. They want to know, what are your public transportation systems, and we don't invest enough in that.
All right, let's get to our final off-the-record parting shots. Mike Miller, up first.
Well, I've said this before and I've been wrong, but I will say it again after this last school shooting. I really think we're going to get some major changes. At least maybe the bump stock or whatever it's called is not major, but I think we're going to get that. And I think this one with the children being involved as lobbyist groups almost, it's going to have an effect. It's going to move some people, and I, for one, hopefully we get something done.
Janetta.
So earlier this month, redistricting reform activists in the legislature struck a deal for a new ballot initiative to end gerrymandering in Ohio to be on the ballot in May. It is now issue 1, so everyone should go vote for issue 1 to stop gerrymandering in Ohio.
Jim.
On this gun issue, Governor Kasich, who's going to present proposals next week, has already talked to Speaker Rosenberger and President Obhoff about this. He said he wanted to tell them this issue is not going away. The governor's problem is he is going away, and they can wait him out if they want to.
Ann.
Here's what else is not going away. That's the children who were, the victims of, of that shooting in Parkland, Florida. They have done an amazing job of coalescing the grief that they're feeling and using it to propel this issue forward. They're not going away, and I think that politicos across the country are paying very close attention to these 17 and 18 and 19-year-olds.
All right, my advice to those worrying about fake news, if it's too good to be true or if it's too bad to be true, don't believe it. That's Columbus on the Record for this week. Check us out online, Facebook, Twitter, and our website where you can see each episode on demand. That's wosu.org/COTR. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.